Thank you. I'm going to give a brief overview for the benefit of the audience and those watching on TV and the Commission as well, of both the process that Pixar needs to go through to get their approvals so that everybody's clear on why we're here tonight and what we're doing and what comes next. And secondly, I'm just going to give a brief outline for the meeting tonight, how the meeting tonight is going to proceed. So first, with regard to the process, Pixar is what's called a planned unit development, or a PUD. PUDs are typically done for large integrated developments on large sites that are often developed over a period of time in phases, generally subject to some kind of master planning. Other PUDs in Emeryville include Chiron, the East Bay Bridge Shopping Center, the Bay Street Project, the Watergate office complex out on the peninsula. A PUD is done in two steps. The first step is what's called a PDP, Preliminary Development Plan. That is the master plan for the whole project. Then that's followed by what are called FDPs, Final Development Plans. And those are more specific designs for the individual phases of the development of the project. PDPs are required to be reviewed by the Planning Commission, and then they go to the City Council for approval. A PDP or a PUD is a rezoning. It's a rezoning of the site. The new zoning of the site becomes that PUD, and the PDP provides the rules that that site must then develop under. In Pixar's case, a PDP was approved in 1998. They are now proposing to expand beyond what that original PDP approved. The site is now larger than it was originally approved for, and the number of buildings is larger than was originally approved for, and our staff will go into more detail on that, and Pixar will also in their presentation. But basically, they are here to seek a revision of their previously approved PDP so that they can expand their project. They are also simultaneously requesting an FDP, a Final Development Plan approval, for their second building, which will be across the street over here at the corner of Park and Hollis. FDPs currently do not require Planning Commission review. They only require City Council approval. Since Pixar has submitted the FDP concurrent with the PDP, we are showing it to the Planning Commission tonight as an informational item so that the Planning Commission can comment on it. There is actually a whole list of approvals that are required in addition to amending the PDP. The PDP is the driver of the whole thing, but the other things that are required are, first of all, as I'm sure many of you know, an environmental document was prepared for this project called a Mitigated Negative Declaration. Before acting on this, both the Planning Commission and the City Council must first approve the Mitigated Negative Declaration. Then they also need to amend the general plan to change the land use designation and the building intensity designation for part of the site, and to eliminate Emery Street as a local street on the general plan circulation drawing, and to relocate a bike route that would run through the site from the general plan circulation drawing. Secondly, they need a vacation of the Emery Street right-of-way. Emery Street is a street that was never built, but the right-of-way is there between Park Avenue and 45th Street. That right-of-way needs to be vacated. Thirdly, the existing bicycle and pedestrian plan, which is not part of the general plan, but it mirrors the general plan, needs to also be amended to relocate that bike route. Fourth, the PDP itself needs to be amended, and as I said, that is a rezoning of the site. Fifth, the Pixar is seeking what's called a development agreement, which is what Mr. Flores described, part of what he described part of it, and the city attorney will describe it in more detail, that stipulates the agreement that the city and Pixar hope to enter into the terms of the future development of the site. And there is a companion agreement to that, which is called a participation agreement, and that is between between Pixar and the Redevelopment Agency. Next, as I said, there is a final development plan proposed. That, as I said, is being given to the commission tonight for information only, and it will then go on to the city council with the commission's comments. And finally, a tentative subdivision map is also required, and that will also be reviewed by the commission and passed on to the council for approval. In addition to all of those things, the Redevelopment Agency, as I already mentioned, also needs to enter into this participation agreement. So that's kind of a long list of various approvals that Pixar needs. The first step is to get the Planning Commission's review and approval of all of those things. Then if, excuse me? Right, and then if that occurs, that is passed on to the City Council and Redevelopment Agency as a recommendation that they act, and that will happen subsequently. So that's sort of the big picture of why we're here and what we're doing. Secondly, just with regard to tonight's meeting and how we've planned for it to proceed, following my explanation here, Senior Planner Deborah Diamond, to my left, will be making a staff presentation on staff's analysis of the project and the issues that staff has identified. Next, Assistant City Attorney Carol Victor, to my right, will explain the provisions of the development agreement. Then our environmental consultants, LSA, will make a brief presentation on the mitigated negative declaration. And I should note that each of these staff and consultant presentations will be followed by questions and answers from the commission, if there are any. Then Pixar will make a presentation of their proposal. Following Pixar's presentation, the public hearing will be opened, and as Chair Martin already indicated, speakers will be limited to 3 minutes, and you need to submit a speaker's card, which I will pass on to Mr. Martin, and he will then read your name, and you can come to the dais when he reads your name. Following the public hearing, when everyone has spoken who wishes to speak, staff and, our environmental consultants will come back. LSA and Fair and Peers, our traffic consultants, will come back and provide responses to the comments that have been received on the environmental documents, specifically from eBase and Shoot Mahaley. Then staff and the consultants and Pixar will respond to any outstanding questions or issues that may have come up during the public comments. Next, the council, the Planning Commission, will deliberate. They will discuss the project. And finally, the commission will take a vote. So that's the script. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about that.
Any questions, Charlie?
All right, if we're all clear on why we're here and what we're doing, I'll turn it over to Deborah Diamond, who will make our staff presentation.
As Deborah gets ready, I'd like to remind everyone here, if you intend to speak to the commission, please pick up a speaker card next to the podium, legibly fill out your name and address, and then give it to Charlie, and he'll bring it up to me. And in the interest of time, again, we're going to ask people, please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less.
Do you have the letter from the AFLC?
And Charlie will let you know when you've reached that 3-minute mark.
Bring out the hook.
Deborah?
You need the wireless mic is there too.
Good evening. Is this working? No.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He contends, yes, we hear it is working. Just speak right into it.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Deborah Diamond. I'm a senior planner with the Planning and Building Department here. And my role tonight will be to walk you through the background and the various features of the proposed Pixar expansion plan. The project is located, as we know, across the street. It's a 21-acre property bordered by 45th Street to the north. The commercial properties along San Pablo Avenue to the east, Park Avenue to the south, and Hollis Street to the west. There is currently a planned unit development, or PUD, approval on the site, and it includes the existing Pixar headquarters building and associated landscaping areas and parking facilities. And these were built as part of Phase 1 of the original Pixar PDP, or Preliminary Development Plan. This original PDP and associated entitlements were approved by the City Council in 1998, and the original PDP permits 2 phases of development, with both phases secured by a combined development agreement and participation agreement with the City and the Redevelopment Agency. Phase 1, which consists of the existing 218,000 square foot building located in the more or less in the center of the site, parking and landscape areas, was completed in the year 2000. Phase 2 was also approved under the original PDP, and that would permit construction up to a 2,000 square foot building within the southwest portion of the site. A deck over the existing parking surface parking over here on the east side was also approved to provide parking for the Phase 2 building, and Phase 2 building has not yet been developed. Since the 1998 approvals, the project applicant has acquired 2 additional properties. One is the castle property in the eastern portion of the site, which is here on this diagram, and also what we're calling the Hollis Street property, which is on the corner of Hollis and 45th in the northwest corner of the site. As shown in this diagram, the project site is comprised of 5 properties. They include the Hollis Street site, and this is a small property currently owned by the Redevelopment Agency, which was a former rail spur, a small site. The Pixar campus as it exists, the extension of Emery Street through this portion of the site, and then the castle property. So with the physical expansion of the site, the applicant is proposing a master plan with 3 additional buildings and a parking garage on the campus. The proposed project would consist of 2 additional phases of construction to accommodate current and projected growth, in addition to the construction of a modified Phase 2. And we'll note that Phase 2 of the project is currently entitled, but is now proposed to involve a smaller building and expanded surface parking to the east rather than a parking deck. Phases 3 and 4 were not entitled, and the applicant is proposing also to subdivide the property, with the result of each building occupying its own parcel. So the PDP describes several phases of development. And the first one would be the Phase 2, which would be modified from the initial Phase 2 that was approved back in '98. This would consist of the construction of a 2-story building with a partial basement, and again on the south and west portion of the site. And at the time of writing the staff report, the PDP envisioned this to be up to 145,000 square feet. The final development plan, which is also being viewed tonight, indicates that that building will be actually 108,000 square feet modified to be smaller. So to accommodate the increased demand for parking, the second phase would include expansion of the existing parking lot to the east, and that would be to expand it over the Emery Street right-of-way and portion of the castle property. In addition to, the applicant would provide 2 public amenities. One is a 7.5-foot wide landscape area along the Hollis Street frontage for public use. That would be along here. And an approximate 40-foot wide linear park with a bicycle and pedestrian path on the eastern portion of the site, which would go through here, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. So here is a drawing of an image of the Phase 2 development. And as you can see, it shows the Phase 2 building here, the existing Hollis Street building continued here, same landscaping as existing, expanded parking to the east, and then we have the 40-foot linear park with the bike path at the far east of the site. For Phase 2, two separate development options are proposed, the choice of which alternative to implement will be based on the size and configuration deemed appropriate by Pixar at the time of development. And here is what we call option 1 of Phase 2. This is one alternative, and that would consist of the construction of a 180,000 square foot two-story office building with a basement in the southeast corner, and would require the removal of the surface parking in that location and the construction of a maximum 6-story or 7-level parking garage fronting on the 45th Street directly to the north of that option 1 building. The parking garage would contain up to 1,800 parking spaces and may be constructed partially during Phase 3 and partially during Phase 4. The phasing of the parking garage would be tailored to meet the city requirements and projected employee and visitor demand as the campus grows. And ultimately, the garage would provide all required parking at the build-out of the campus.
Deborah, if you can talk a little slower so the court reporter can
I'm sorry.
catch up with you.
Absolutely.
Louder, too.
Okay. And this diagram shows option 2 of Phase 3. This is another alternative. And this would consist of the construction of a 2-story with basement or 3-story office building comprised of approximately 200,000 square feet in the northwest corner of the project site. The construction of this building would require the demolition of the existing 1-story brick building on the Hollis property. At the northeast corner of the site, a parking garage, as described under option 1, would be constructed, and in addition, option 2 would include the removal of surface parking in the southeastern portion of the site, which would be the option 1 building site, and of course the installation of landscaping, including turf and trees. Phase 4 would consist of a full build-out of the site, and it would include the building that would not have been built during Phase 3 and the completion of the parking garage. In terms of timeline, Phase 2 construction is expected to be completed by 2008. Phase 3 construction is anticipated to begin around 2013 and be completed by 2016, and Phase 4 would begin approximately 2021 and be completed by 2024. So you can see it's a long-range development plan. I want to talk a little bit about the design and the landscaping, and I think I can leave this here for that. The future landscaping would be similar to the existing open spaces on the campus. All pedestrian pathways and roads would be paved with impervious surfaces and open space areas, and would be planted with trees, grass, and flowering plants. And then the black metal perimeter fencing as existing will continue to surround the campus. We'll talk a little bit about the Hollis Street frontage. We discussed the pedestrian amenity proposed along Hollis Street, and so in addition to the interior landscaping, this 7.5-foot setback area would be landscaped with and would provide benches for public use. It would be created by moving the perimeter fencing, which is currently at 2.5 feet from the property line, back so that it is at 7.5 feet from the property line. And then also the Emery Street right-of-way and pedestrian bike path. The Emery Street right-of-way between Park Avenue and 45th Street which is the extension of Emery here, is currently unimproved. And the master plan would include the vacation of this block of Emery Street, which would result in the necessity to reroute the Class 2 bike route, which is planned for that section of Emery Street. So an area of equivalent size to the right-of-way would be dedicated as a 40-foot wide linear park at the eastern edge of the site. And this would be right adjacent to the promenade shopping area where Long's is right here. This area would be would include a bike and pedestrian trail designed as a Class 1 bike path and pedestrian amenities and landscaping. The area would be deeded to the city. The project applicant would construct and pay for all the initial construction and landscaping, and the city would be responsible for continued maintenance. So as far as vehicular and pedestrian access to the Pixar campus, ingress and egress would continue to be through the existing Park Avenue gate during all phases of construction. In phases 3 and 4, vehicles would exit the parking structure via the main driveway and the 45th Street gate here. Ingress via the 45th Street gate would occur only during special events. And there are currently 5 locations for pedestrian access to the campus. New gates for employee pedestrian access would be provided during Phase 2, and additional pedestrian access gates may be provided during Phases 3 and 4 as well. Off-site circulation improvements will include curbs and gutters and sidewalks, replacement of those adjacent to the Hollis Street and the Castle properties where applicable, and striping and bike route signage and bollards will be needed. Also, the project applicant will fund installation of stop signs on Park Avenue at Watts Street and contribute to future signalization at the Park Avenue and Horton Street intersection. I'd like to note that while the staff report indicates that the curb extensions, or as we call them, bulb outs, would be provided on both sides of Park Avenue at the various intersections, Pixar instead has proposed to pay the city $50,000 as an in lieu fee for pedestrian safety improvements, and so staff is recommending that one of the conditions of approval be amended accordingly, and that would be condition 4A in section 2, subsection A. There would be utility connections. New utilities would be installed to serve the new facilities within the project site as they are developed. And staff would like to note a correction to page 103 of the mitigated negative declaration that due to capacity constraints, the Phase 3 Option 2 building will connect to the sanitary sewer that runs along Park Avenue, not to the sewer on 45th Street as indicated in the MND. Also, the existing 10-foot wide easement in the Emery Street right-of-way includes utility easement with electrical and telephone utility lines, and those would need to be rerouted to the east to the linear park property that would be deeded to the city. Mr. Bryant has reviewed the entitlements to achieve the master plan, and I'd just like to go through quickly some of the specific amendments that would be required for the city documents. As Mr. Bryant noted, there were a number of general plan amendments. I can fix this. Currently, the general plan map which is part of the general plan, the land use diagram, designates the project site, which is shown in this bold square, which is basically what we've referred to as the Hollis Street property, for industrial use. The Pixar campus is proposing mostly office use, which falls into a commercial category, and therefore an amendment to change this Hollis Street property from industrial to commercial would be required. Also, as part of the general plan, there's a building intensity map that indicates the building intensities envisioned throughout the city in terms of their floor area ratio, or FAR. The Hollis Street property, again, is designated as a 0.7 floor area ratio and would need to be amended to the 1.4 FAR to be consistent with the rest of the campus. The circulation map of the general plan designates the Emery Street right-of-way between Park Avenue and 45th Street as a local street on the general plan circulation map. In order to vacate this portion of Emery Street, it would have to be eliminated from the circulation plan. And in addition, the circulation plan was previously amended to designate this segment of Emery Street right-of-way as a pedestrian bicycle route. And so Pixar is requesting that the pedestrian bicycle route be relocated to the proposed linear park. So those are the amendments to the general plan. Also required would be an amendment to the bicycle and pedestrian plan. And this indicates figure 3 of the bikeway network and indicates the bike ped plan continuing along Emery Street. This segment would have to be moved further east and changed from a Class 2 bike lane to a Class 1 path as proposed. Part of the approval of a revised preliminary development plan would include some zone changes. So the existing PDP must be amended to expand the site area to include the Emery Street right-of-way, the Castle property, and the Hollis properties, including the rail spur. These amendments would include rezoning of the Hollis property from light industrial, again, the Hollis property from light industrial to planned unit development consistent with the rest of the campus. And also PUD designation is existing on the Castle property as well as the Emery Street right-of-way. And also related to zoning changes is the building height map. The Hollis property is designated 40 feet, and the proposal is to redesignate it to PUD. Now, just a little bit about the Castle property. It was subject to, originally subject to an FDP for residential development, and this was approved by the City Council. And its final development plan provided for the development of 102 residential units, including 20 moderate income units, in conjunction with and west of the Promenade retail center on San Pablo Avenue. However, unlike the retail portion, the residential piece was never constructed. Pixar since has acquired the property from the previous developer, and as part of the acquisition of the Castle property, the participation agreement with the prior developer was terminated by the Redevelopment Agency. The conditions of approval to that FDP provided that it shall become void if the participation agreement is terminated, so accordingly the final development plan associated with the Castle property was voided by operation of law at the time that the participation agreement was terminated, and that was in October of 2002. mentioned earlier that among the approvals are a tentative map and a final map to subdivide the property. Pixar has applied for a tentative subdivision map, and that would divide the expanded property into 7 parcels, 1 for each structure proposed for phases 1 through 4, plus 1 each for the parking garage, the bicycle path, and the central landscaped area. The approval of a tentative map is required by the State Subdivision Map Act and the city's subdivision and parcel map law for all subdivisions that create 5 or more parcels. As Mr. Bryant mentioned, the final development for Phase 2 is being presented and will go to the City Council as part of the master plan approvals. So it's also the FDP for Phase 2 is also being considered at this time, but pursuant to the zoning regulations, action on the final development plans are the purview of the City Council, and staff is providing the Planning Commission with copies of the plans for information and comment only. And I don't want to spend too much time going through the FDP plans, but we'll just look at them briefly. So the purpose of the FDP is to provide more specific characterization, and so this phase would show the creation of the new building in the southwest portion and the extension of the parking to the east, the linear park, and the improvement and setback of the 7.5-foot margin on the Hollis Street side. We'll just flip through and look at some of the elevations as well. It's basically a 2-story building with a very small partial basement. This would be the Hollis Street side, and this is the east side. It's mostly clad in brick with large inset windows and with a glass atrium covering the entire east side, and this would be open floor to ceiling. And this is the south side elevation, basically what we would see from this building. Here's the east elevation of the glass atrium, and then the west side. Here's a little bit more detail on the linear path along the eastern portion of the site. Again, here's Long's, and this is the expanded parking with the pedestrian bike route going through here, approximately a 10-foot wide path with landscaping and a small plaza and some benches and other amenities as well. So staff has identified a number of issues that the Planning Commission may wish to consider at this time, and the Commission may also identify other issues that have not been covered in the staff report. We thought that building and site design would be something that the Commission would care to discuss. The proposed office research and development buildings would be 2 to 3 stories. They would be arranged around a landscape quadrangle at the southern portion of the site. And except for the Phase 2 portion shown here, the architectural details are not available at this time for the remainder of the site. It's the kind of general conceptual review that you have for the preliminary development plan. This campus-style development pattern is reflected in the preliminary development plans, and the visual link to the surrounding brick buildings and the low-rise industrial buildings that surround the site, which that visual link is prescribed by the general plan. That would need to be achieved through more detailed architectural and landscape design submitted as part of the final development plans for each phase. The FDP for Phase 2 building appears to be consistent in terms of its materials and scale to the surrounding context. The parking structure is proposed to be 5 to 6 stories and ranging in height from 50 to 60 feet, and would be taller than most buildings in the vicinity and visually prominent, especially on 45th Street and San Pablo Avenue. So to address any potential negative impacts on the visual quality, a mitigation measure has been established to prescribe certain design guidelines. And those would be that the structures be adequately referenced and visually compatible with surrounding historic brick buildings. Examples of such reference to surrounding brick buildings would include, but not be limited to, brick facings, deeply recessed windows, arched lintels, mullions, symmetry, and windows proportional to the building mass. For the garage, the bulk of the garage shall be minimized by divided into separate building masses with varied setbacks, heights, designs, and materials. The garage must be compatible with the design of the other buildings on campus and must be screened with installation of trees to minimize the visual impact on 45th Street and San Pablo Avenue. And the upper levels of the garage shall be set back 1 foot on all sides for every foot that the building exceeds the height of the existing Phase 1 building that's existing on the site now. A couple other mitigations regarding the elimination of glare by shielding lighting, and also that parked cars would not be visible from the surroundings. It should be noted that the setback of the upper levels of the garage may reduce the amount of parking space available. So when it exceeds the height of the existing Phase 1 building, setback is a requirement, and therefore that may reduce the parking that can be provided. Therefore, an additional garage level may be needed.
Deborah, can I ask, what is the height of the Phase 1 building? It's not specified in the initial study. Is it 40 feet?
I don't know. I'll have to look that up.
Thank
40
you.
feet, thank you. Another issue that staff would like to bring up is the loss of the 4240 Hollis Street building. This is the brick building that houses a number of businesses, including Semi-Freddy's and Bisco's. The Pixar expansion would result in the demolition of this building and replacement with a new building, which would be set back from the street. And so to ameliorate the loss of the character provided by this brick building, the project would provide this public amenity of the 7.5-foot setback with landscaping and benches along the Hollis Street frontage. Transportation impact analysis was prepared for the project by Fair and Peers, transportation consultants, and the study analyzed the project's potential impacts on 24 intersections for morning and evening peak hour operations. The analysis included 8 different scenarios of development from existing levels to full build-out at year 2024. And it concluded that the traffic associated with the Pixar expansion project would result in significant off-site impacts at the Park Avenue Horton Street and its intersection for the year 2025 scenarios. However, that intersection is projected to operate at a deficient service level prior to the addition of the Pixar project traffic. Thus, Pixar would be required to contribute its fair share to intersection signalization, and that would be in addition to its contribution to the city's traffic impact fee program. The traffic analysis also addressed pedestrian, bicycle, and traffic impacts and provides recommendations for mitigations to those as well. Another issue that we wanted to bring up was the concept of loss of housing. Although the revised master plan would not specifically displace existing housing, it would preclude the development of future housing on the castle property. And as we discussed, the approved FDP on the castle property, which has since been voided, provided for 102 residential units that were never built. New legislation requires that the city make certain findings prior to reducing any residential densities, and this is discussed specifically in the mitigated negative declaration. But because the residential project on the castle property is one of the approved housing projects identified in the city's housing element, that particular new legislation would apply. And as discussed in more detail in the MMD, even with the loss of opportunity to build housing on the castle property, the housing element identifies adequate other sites to accommodate and even exceed the city's share of the regional housing need. So the Planning Commission and the City Council may easily make the finding required. Another issue that staff would like to bring up is the loss of the Emery Street connection. The Promenade project would have constructed Emery Street between Park Avenue and 45th, resulting in a direct connection from 45th Street to Peralta Street at West MacArthur Boulevard. Pixar's expansion would mean that this connection would not be built, and if Emery Street were improved, the city would terminate at 45th Street, and according to the traffic consultants, Emery Street would not be a viable north-south alternative to San Pablo Avenue, and for this reason, the vacation of Emery Street is not considered a significant project-related impact. And we have discussed the shifting of the Class 2 bike route to a Class 1 facility moved further east. Another issue that staff would like to address, is the final one, would be public access to the Pixar campus and or its open space. And there has been discussion about Pixar's private park and how desirable it would be if it was open to the public. Although Pixar allows the public to see into its campus and provides tours by appointment for Emeryville school children and others, Pixar is also working with the city's recreation department to develop additional programs for youth. Nonetheless, it would be a benefit to the city if the revised master plan could incorporate ways of making the campus more accessible and more integrated into the surrounding urban fabric. The city staff has worked with Pixar, and the applicant has expressed apprehension about such measures, citing the need for security. And while the applicant is unwilling to provide greater access to the campus, they have agreed to provide our 7.5-foot strip along Hollis Street and the 40-foot wide linear park on the eastern edge. So in conclusion, staff has worked closely with the applicant to address the development issues discussed above. It is recommended that the Planning Commission, after holding a public hearing on this item, recommend that the City Council adopt the mitigated negative declaration, and it is further recommended that the Commission recommend City Council approval of the actions necessary to implement the revised Pixar Master Plan, including the General Plan Amendment, amendment to the Bike and Pedestrian Plan, modification of the PDP, the amendments to the Development Agreement and Participation Agreement, vacation of a portion of Emery Street, and the tentative subdivision map. The Planning Commission may also provide comments to the City Council on the final development plan. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Are there any questions for Deborah? Thank you, Deborah. And I think that Carol, Victor, you were going to address the commission?
Nope. I was going to introduce you. Go right ahead.
Carol Victor, Assistant City Attorney, Vice Chair Martin, members of the Planning Commission. I am going to outline for you the major terms of the participation agreement and the development agreement that we have negotiated with Pixar's legal team. At the outset, I want to say that the product that you have before you is the result of long negotiations with Pixar's legal team, and the city was assisted assisted by its outside counsel, McDonough, Holland, and Allen. It certainly, I think, is the opinion of all parties that the agreements that are before you are, from the city's perspective, superior to the 1998 agreement we had with Pixar, and provide better assurances and protections to the city to ensure that the city gets the benefits of this development. So we really do have a superior product for the council to approve. The prior agreement was a development agreement and participation agreement between the city, the agency, and Pixar. And what this agreement does is separate those two agreements. So we will have an amended and restated development agreement with the city, and an amended and restated agreement with the agency. The participation agreement, which is the agreement with the agency, is not legally subject to Planning Commission approval, but the agreements are so interrelated that both are being presented to the Commission for their review and their recommendation. The significant deal points of the agreements are that Pixar will pay the city $1.5 million capital improvement and service fee, and that's payable in three $500,000 installments as the development proceeds. The first installment will be paid to the city on the effective date of the DA, which I believe is 60 days after it's approved. The second and third installments would be due at the time that Pixar receives its building permits for Phase 3 and Phase 4. The monies that the city is receiving may be spent for capital improvements and services that benefit the city, and they can be spent as the city sees fit in its sole discretion. Pixar will also be paying development fees that are in place at the time it applies for building permits for Phase 3 and 4. At this time, Pixar has already paid all of its development fees for Phase 2, and I note that that was a larger building that was to be constructed, but they've already paid it, and the only fee they'll have to pay is the school impact mitigation fee. Under the DA, actually the participation agreement, the agency owns the spur parcel, which is the railroad parcel near, basically in 4240 Hollis. And we will sell that to Pixar for $35 a square foot, or $287,380. The Emery Street parcels are held in ownership between the city owns one parcel and the agency owns one parcel. The city will transfer its parcel to the agency, and then the agency will transfer both parcels to Pixar. In exchange, we're basically doing almost an equal square footage swap with Pixar, where they are going to dedicate the land on the eastern boundary of the property. In addition, they've agreed to construct landscape improvements and pedestrian improvements and a Class 1 bicycle facility to replace the Class 2 bike lane that was originally proposed for Emery Street. The agreement provides that no transfers of property shall occur until Pixar is ready to commence construction. So the city will not lose control of any parcels until we have assurance that the development is going to proceed. The agreements provide for phasing of construction as follows. Construction of Phase 2 is scheduled to commence within 18 months of the effective date of the development agreement. If Pixar is not ready to proceed in 18 months, they can have up to 42 months from the effective date. I think that's 3.5 years, if they dedicate the land for the bike path to the city. And then, so we would already get the benefit of that land. It would be in city ownership. And then they could wait up to 3.5 years, and then when they were ready to proceed, they would construct the bike path at that time. The Pixar has also agreed to construct pedestrian and landscape improvements along a 7.5 setback along Hollis Street frontage. And if Pixar fails to commence construction for Phase 2 within the time that's set forth in the development agreement and the participation agreement, the city has the ability to terminate the agreements, and the agency also. The Phase 3 improvements are required to commence within 7 years of the effective date of the development agreement, If construction does not commence at that time, Pixar is obligated to pay a $1 million delay fee to the city. And upon payment of that fee, Pixar shall have up to 10 years to commence construction of Phase 3. If the construction is not commenced within that time or diligently prosecuted to completion, the city and agency have the right to terminate the agreements and repurchase the Castle property and the Emery Street parcels from Pixar. And then the bicycle path and any other public improvements that are constructed would remain the property of the city. With regard to Phase 4, there is no obligation for Pixar to proceed with Phase 4. It's at their option. Construction is expected to proceed anytime after the Phase 3 improvements are completed until the expiration of the amended and restated development agreement. The development agreement is, the length is 18 years, and the participation agreement is 14 years, or if Phase 3 is completed before the expiration of 14 years, then the participation agreement would terminate at that time. I'd like to point out that the the agreements that are in front of you are largely complete. We expect that there'll be some cleanup of some language, especially in the participation agreement. But most substantive differences with Pixar have been resolved. There is one outstanding issue regarding what conditions the assignment or transfer of the property should be subject to with regard to Phase 3. And we are going to continue between now and the City Council meeting negotiating with Pixar's legal team regarding that point. And if we're unable to reach agreement on that point, it will be presented to the City Council for resolution. The next issue I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is the street vacation and abandonment of Emery Street. The development agreement provides that the city will vacate Emery Street, and that's one of the approvals that is before you to recommend to the City Council. In order to do so, state law requires the Planning Commission to review the proposed vacation to determine whether the vacation and the proposed dedication of land conforms to the city's general plan. With the amendments that you are being asked to recommend to the general plan, the vacation of Emery Street and the dedication of land will be consistent with the general plan with those amendments. State law also requires that you find that the street is unnecessary for present or prospective public use and that the right-of-way is not useful as a non-motorized transportation facility. As described in the traffic study in more detail, this portion of Emery Street has never existed and is shown only on paper, and it's not necessary as a local street. Because the Class 2 bike route is being rerouted approximately 150 feet to the east, the bicycle lane on Emery Street would be duplicative of what the project is providing, and therefore it's not useful for non-motorized transportation purposes. We are recommending that a conditional vacation be adopted by the City Council, and the condition would be that Pixar relocate all of the existing utilities into the dedicated bike path on the eastern edge of the property. And until that condition is met, then the resolution of vacation would not be recorded and would not become effective. Do you have any questions regarding the agreements?
I have one question.
Sure.
I've read a lot about a community benefit agreement, and I think for the public and perhaps the commission, if you could briefly explain the difference. What is a community benefit agreement? Is that something the city has entered into before?
No, the city's never entered into a community benefits agreement. I think certainly no one in the city that I know of is advocating a community benefits agreement or thinks that one is necessary. I think we, through our negotiations with Pixar and this development agreement and participation agreement with the direction that was given by council early on, certainly feel that we have gotten benefits that benefit the entire community, and that we have fulfilled the city's role, the city's legal role to ensure that the development agreement is fair and in the public interest. I think that the eBase, who's advocating a community benefits agreement, perhaps can expand as to what they think that agreement will offer. I know it's certainly our position that the development agreement and the participation agreement protect the community.
Thank you, Carol. I think now we're going to have a brief presentation from LSA, the mitigating negative declaration consultant.
Correct. Lynette Diaz from LSA will make that presentation.
Thank you. As Charlie mentioned, I'm Lynette Diaz. I'm a principal with LSA Associates. We're a multidisciplinary environmental consulting firm. We were the prime consultant that the City of Emeryville contracted with to prepare the environmental review document and analysis for the proposed Pixar project. Also with me this evening is Adam Weinstein, who was the day-to-day project manager on it, and if you have a lot of questions, he may be up here helping me out. So, tonight the Planning Commission is considering making a recommendation that the City Council adopt the mitigated neg deck for the proposed Pixar project. By doing that, you're making a statement that you feel the project has been adequately analyzed pursuant to CEQA, and that you have the information before you relative to the potential environmental effects to consider the project. The purpose of my presentation this evening is to summarize the CEQA process that we undertook for the project and to briefly review the key findings of the initial study and mitigated neg deck. And I am going to try to keep that pretty brief, and then if you have specific questions, I'll be happy to answer them. So I'll begin by just providing an overview of the process so everybody understands what we did and what has been done. We began by documenting the existing conditions that are out there today on the site and within Emeryville and the surrounding vicinity that could be affected by the development of the future phases of the Pixar project. Following that, we conducted the analysis to assess what impacts, potential environmental impacts the project would have. CEQA focuses on physical environmental effects. It doesn't require or advocate the analysis of socioeconomic impacts or impacts that don't result in physical impacts as a direct result of the project. So that's what our analysis focused on. We, as part of that, we prepared a standalone traffic analysis and a standalone cultural resources study that specifically looked at the historic significance of the building on Hollis Street. Once the analysis was completed, it was compiled into a draft initial study, and based on the findings of that initial study, together with the city staff, we made a determination that the project would not have a significant effect on the environment that could not be mitigated to a less than significant level, and therefore we prepared a draft mitigated negative declaration and circulated that for public review for a total of 30 days, which is what's required under CEQA. The public review period began on March 9th and ended on April 8th. I'm going to now take a few moments to highlight the key findings of the initial study mitigated neg deck. I'm not going to comprehensively cover every single issue that was addressed in there. So I'm going to briefly talk about each of the topics where we did identify that there could be a potential impact if mitigation was not imposed on the project. The first topic was aesthetics, and that related to the potential mass of the building, of the parking structure, the bulk of the parking structure. Because it's a PDP for that, it has not been the final design of it has not been articulated, so we recommended some design guidelines and performance standards to ensure that the bulk of that would be appropriate to the area. And then we also identified a potential impact relative to the project on the surrounding historic buildings and recommended some design guidelines to ensure that it would fit into the context of the area and not significantly impact those the historic buildings. Relative to air quality, there was impacts identified related to the construction period of the project. Those, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District CEQA guidelines are very specific and state that construction period impacts are not considered significant in the Bay Area. In other air quality districts, they are, and the air quality in those districts is different and worse than it is in the Bay Area. The Bay Area is actually one of the better districts in the state of California. And they state if you follow their recommended measures for controlling dust on the site, that the project's construction period impacts will not be considered significant. So we detail both the basic and enhanced measures that the district recommends. Relative to cultural resources, I mentioned that we prepared a historic analysis of the building at 424 Hollis, and according, and determined that based on the significance criteria identified in the CEQA guidelines, which are very detailed for historic resources, that building is not considered historically significant under CEQA, and so that the demolition of it would not result in any significant impacts. However, relative to archaeological and paleontological impacts, there is the possibility that when you get into site grading in some of the areas of the site that have not been graded or remediated, that some unidentified historic resources could be identified, so standard mitigations to address those, which are typical of just about any project in the Bay Area, are recommended in the initial study. And then relative to geology...
Lynette, I wanted to ask you a question there.
Sure.
Under Cultural Resources Mitigation Measure Cultural 4, page 3, there's a provision in there for a determination by the Native American Heritage Commission within 24 hours of a discovery of or determination by the coroner that this is a discovery of Native American heritage. Is a 24-hour
standard?
It
Yes.
seems like a very short time period in which to respond and make recommendations, and I just wanted to make
that's
sure
the
that was
industry standard.
Okay, thank you.
The next three topics I'm going to lump into one, and that's geology, soil seismicity, hazards, and hydrology and water quality. The project would result in potential significant impacts relative to all those topics, but none of the potential impacts are out of the ordinary that aren't associated with just about every construction project that occurs. And so the mitigation measures there are pretty standard and typical of what is necessary to ensure that significant impacts don't occur in those topic areas. And related to hazards, there are 2 risk management plans that have already been prepared to address contamination on the site that was previously associated with the, I've drawn a blank, Del Monte?
Kaiser Hospital?
No, it was actually there.
Del Monte Cannery.
Yeah, Del Monte, thank you. I questioned myself there. Then relative to noise, no operational period noise associated with an increase in traffic was identified, but noise associated with construction was identified as a short-term construction period impact. However, the city of Emeryville, similar to a lot of other cities, exempts construction period noise as being significant as long as construction occurs during the permitted hours based on the city's municipal code. The transportation and traffic analysis, several potential impacts were identified there relative to the operation of roadways and the impact of increased traffic on those roadways. There was 2 impacts identified. One would be deficient operations. The project would contribute to deficient operations at the intersection of Park Avenue and Horton Street in the year 2025, because we looked at 2005 as basically what the project would be under existing conditions, because that's the first year new construction would occur. 2010 and 2025, which are the out years and cumulative years that are required to be considered by the CMA, which is the Congestion Management Agency for the area. Then we also identified a cumulative impact just overall on the city's roadway systems, and that just acknowledging that, yes, increased traffic is going to contribute to traffic on the city's roadway systems, and recommended a mitigation to participate in the city's traffic impact fee program relative to the Park Avenue and Horton Street. That impact can be mitigated with the installation of a signal, and that's recommended in the mitigation measure as well. Pedestrian safety was also considered in the analysis, and a number of recommendations for mitigation measures are outlined there, and if each of those are implemented, there would be no significant impacts relative to safety, pedestrian and bike safety. Site access was also considered, and a number of mitigation measures are recommended to improve site access and to ensure that no significant safety impacts would occur. There is also a recommendation for a construction phasing and management plan to address the transition and parking on the site, as well as just traffic coming to the site associated with traffic, and make sure they follow the appropriate routes, etc. And then relative to transit, the increase in employment that would result from the project would impact the transit system, and that can be addressed through the Pixar's continuous participation in the TMA. And then under utilities and service systems, there's a potential impact relative to solid waste generated by the project. That's actually not that big a one. I'm not sure why I made my presentation, but that's pretty normal, and there's standard mitigations recommended to address that potential impact. So I'm going to conclude my presentation and be available for any questions.
Yeah, are there any, Joe, you have some questions?
Yeah. I read your response to the questions of the law firm that was representing eBase, and was that provided by in-house counsel or?
The response?
Yes.
No, that was actually drafted by us, and we'll be providing a presentation on those following the comments, the public hearing.
Because it was very detailed, I want to thank you very much. It was very detailed and addressed a number of my questions, so it's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Not at this time.
I actually have a couple of questions. Under mitigation measure noise 1, I understand the conclusion with regard to significance for noise and construction noise. There's some limitations on pile driving, and we received a comment letter from Phyllis Fox on page 27. She lists a number of perhaps alternative measures in addressing pile driving as a construction-related disturbance. I'm not sure you had an opportunity to look at those in detail, but I would hope that perhaps during the public hearing you could look at those and then report back to the commission whether you believe any of those are feasible.
Sure, I can do that.
Under mitigation transportation 4, you recommend bulb outs that Deborah indicated Pixar was interested in paying a fee rather than actually implementing those improvements. And then under mitigation measure transportation 8, and the discussion in the MND, there's a concern for interruption of the eastbound Park Avenue left turn movement into...
Can you reference a page in the initial study?
I'm looking on page 6 of your summary of mitigation measures under
Okay.
transportation 4.
Okay.
Commissioner Martin, may I interrupt for a moment?
Do we need to take a break?
No, I just wanted to point out that Pixar will do the bulb out that's required as a mitigation measure. It's the other additional bulb outs that because there were some concerns on staff as to whether we wanted to construct them at this point and whether they were necessary or not, we reached an agreement with Pixar that they would pay $50,000. But the mitigation measure that requires that bulb out at Watts would still be part of the project.
Okay. Thank you, Carol. How are we doing with the court reporter? Almost. Okay. 5 minutes? Thank you. I guess my question there isn't with regard to payment, but the safety and querying issue and how best to resolve that, and whether it's appropriate to have the bulb on the south side of Park Avenue. And perhaps you could think about that during the public hearing as well and respond to some
Okay,
alternative
actually,
in
I
dealing with
think
that issue.
if you'd like a response, Rob Reese could provide you a response now, although we're trying to take a break, so maybe we should do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think if we, what I'm
Okay.
trying to do is point out some
Okay.
issues that I'd like you to think about during the public hearing process in addition to the comments. I think that's it for my questions.
Thank you. We'll be sure to address those. Is that all?
Yes.
Great.
Thank you, Lynette.
Thank you.
And now we have a presentation from Pixar.
Did you want
I
to
guess
take?
we are going to take a break. Thank you for reminding me. How much time do you need? 5 minutes? 10 minutes? 5 minutes. So we will reconvene at 9:34.
Just don't throw the one down there. And you've got to get the security, the code is,
We're actually leaving.
4. Yeah. He'll just let you know.
So we're ready to reconvene the Pixar item on the agenda. I think Pixar is going to make a presentation.
Good evening, members of the Commission. Thank you for having us here tonight. First, I'd like to thank, again, the staff of Emeryville for helping us with this process. It's been a long process, and I really have appreciated the professionalism and the integrity of all the city staff, Mike and Carol and John and Pat and Charlie. So it hasn't been an easy process, but as we stand here tonight, I feel that this is a project that Pixar really can stand behind, and I hope that Emeryville and the city will stand behind it as well. I'll try to be brief. I know everybody's tired. And I am going to go through the plans, but I'll go through them briefly because it sounds like everybody at least now has some knowledge of what we're proposing as the plans. But before I do that, I'd like to talk a little bit about Pixar and about some of the benefits that I think this plan is going to bring to the community. A year and a half ago, we were here at a study session to council, and we heard comments. And a year ago, exactly to this month, we were at another study session to the Planning Commission, and we heard a lot of comments at that time. And one of the things that I heard especially was, you need to get out into the community and get responses to your plan, and then come back and tell us that you actually have addressed the needs of this community. And I feel that we've done that. In fact, I know we've done that. Pixar is a big community player, and irregardless of this project, Pixar is out in the community, and we have invited the community into Pixar many, many times. We do fundraisers, auctions. We're on various boards in this city. We're on the board of EAF. We're on the board of ECAP. We're on the board of the Chamber of Commerce. We are very involved in the educational community, and that's one of the things that are really dear to Pixar. So we have gotten a lot of feedback from the community regarding this plan, and I just want to try to address some of them as I go through the project, because I know that's important to you as commissioners. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the financial benefits that this project's going to bring to the city. And I did put a more up-to-date spreadsheet just on your desk just now, and because the one I had given you earlier, I had inadvertently left off a couple key things.
Tom, do you want to put that on the overhead?
Sure.
I'm not sure it'll be legible, but we can try. Should just... Are you trying to focus?
AV guy? Okay. Well, let me just talk anyway. And if I can get some help, then I'll be happy to put that up. Okay, great. So,
It's too high-tech for Pixar.
Deborah, can you help him zoom in on that, please?
thank you, Deborah. Okay, so let me just talk a little bit about some of the one-time collections that the city of Emeryville has already recognized or will recognize with this project. When we bought the castle property, we gave the city, the housing low and moderate housing agency, $860,000. We've also given the general fund of Emeryville $450,000. So those are two things already that we've given to the city. As staff mentioned, we will be giving an additional $50,000 towards public safety, and we will be giving an additional $1.5 million over the course of the next 3 phases, with the first $500,000 due when we pull our permit for the next building. So if I add all those up, plus the sales taxes that will be due from campus construction, we'll be contributing approximately $4,675,000 to the city over the course of this project, and that does not include art fees, permit fees, et cetera, for phases 3 and 4. On an annual basis, the city of Emeryville at full build-out is going to realize approximately $5 million in property tax, parcel tax, utility tax, and sales tax. And of that $5 million, approximately $3 million comes from property tax. And I'd just like to point out that of that $3 million, 20% of that, which is approximately $600,000, gets set aside for low and moderate income housing. And that $600,000 every year can be turned into a $6 million housing bond. So every year, Pixar is going to give you the ability to raise a $6 million housing bond. And I think that's a significant thing. And then I've talked a little bit about some of the things we've done in the community, so I'm not going to go over any of those things again. But I would like to just make a general comment. I think a lot of people in Emeryville don't always realize how much Pixar does for this community. And we don't stand up here and grandstand, and it's hard for me actually to do this, but we do feel very much a part of this community, and it would, and we know that a lot of people recognize it. So I think tonight maybe some new people will recognize some of these things that we've done and will continue to do. I want to talk a little bit about one of the things that we heard was that people thought that traffic would be a problem, and I think Lynette and her team are already going to address and have addressed the traffic mitigations. But I want to talk just really quickly about some of the things that Pixar internally does to try to reduce traffic in Emeryville, because nobody knows this. We haven't really given this out to anybody. First of all, I'm really happy to say that Pixar was named by the EPA as one of the best Bay Area's best workplaces for commuters. And that designation is given to those companies who offer a high level of alternative commute support programs. And some of those programs that we offer are a $45 per month transit pass subsidy to every employee. That can be used for BART, AC Transit, Muni, whatever. We offer a pre-tax transit pass purchase program, so if you spend more than $45, you can have money taken out of your paycheck that's tax-free up to a certain limit. Of course, we contribute to the Emory Go-Round, and we will continue to contribute even more as we grow. We have joined the Alameda County's Guaranteed Ride Home program, which means that if you are in a rideshare program or are taking alternative modes of transportation and you have to work late or for some reason you miss your ride, you will be given a free voucher for a taxi all the way to your home, no matter where you live. We, of course, support the Bike to Work Day, which is a big deal at Pixar. We always have people who just jam our hallways with bikes. And the fire marshal didn't hear that, I hope. And we also have a van pool program where we support vans, and we pay for the leasing, maintaining, and insuring of those vans. And as that grows, it is in place, and as it grows, we'll continue to add more vans as need be. We offer, every new employee is provided with a commutes benefit program kit. And lastly, which I think is great, we have a personalized commutes benefits consultant on tap to come in and talk to anybody at Pixar anytime to talk about all the various forms of commuting and how to save, how not to drive to work. So those are just some things that I know haven't been brought up at all, and it's just another thing that makes Pixar such a wonderful place to work, and I hope what you realize it is really a wonderful addition to have in your community.
Is there a chance we could get a copy of that
Sure.
list? Because I think we can give that to our other
Absolutely.
employers. That's very good.
Okay, so let me I know staff did a really good job of presenting the plans, but let me present it from our point of view. And so I'm going to just walk around a little bit. What we have in front of me, and I'm sorry if everybody can't see this, but it's the massing model. And what we're here for is the PDP. And the PDP is all about massing. It's not about how the buildings look. So I just have to reiterate that these are maximum volumes that we could build, but they don't represent the look of the buildings. Otherwise, this would look like 5 IKEA stores. So, but it does give you a good view of what the campus will look like when it's fully built out. And I think key things to note, and this is one of the things we heard last time we were here a year ago, was that the city wants an urban edge. The city wants buildings on Hollis Street. Now there's going to be 2 buildings on Hollis Street. The city wants buildings on Park Street. Now there's going to be 2 buildings fronting, Park Avenue. And whether you think that the size of our park is appropriate or not, you can see that now the size of the park has been reduced quite dramatically. And I think you could say that it's more in proportion to this overall master plan. 2 things that we heard also from community members especially was, how can we open up our park to the community? And it's hard to open it up given our security regulations and the way we feel about security. So what we came up with, and it seems to be very, very highly received by everybody that I've talked to, is that we are building a linear park for the city on our eastern edge, and that's going to include a bike path. And I'm just going to put up a little blow-up of that right here. And it's going to be really beautiful. It's going to be a really nice backdrop to the Promenade Center, and it's going to be a nice backdrop to our parking lot and to our campus. And it's going to be lit. It's going to be fully landscaped. It's going to have benches. It's going to have a little plaza that is let's see. It's going to have It's going to have a little plaza that is directly opposite the plaza that is between Copacabana and Arizmendi. So you'll actually get kind of a visual from San Pablo right up to this public plaza, and then that will link with the bike path. So we're really excited about it. I think the city's pretty excited about it, and I will say that it's also quite a bit larger than what we had originally proposed, but given what the city wanted and what staff wanted, we felt just fine making it as big as it is. Then the other thing that we're providing, and none of these drawings really show it very well, but on our Hollis Street frontage here, we looked really hard at trying to do something on the corner of Park and Hollis, because we did get comments from people about, well, what could you do on Park and Hollis? And we took photographs of it, we analyzed it, Peter Walker, who is a fantastic landscape architect, really looked at it, and the people at Peter Walker at least, and frankly, we couldn't come up with anything that was acceptable because it's not an easy corner. It's got the traffic lights, it's got street lights, it's got transformers, and it's also very close to the edge of our building. So what Peter Walker's office came up with, well, let's pull our building back a little bit on Hollis Street, and let's make part of this space outside the fence accessible to the public. And let's put benches there. And what that does is as you're driving down Hollis Street going towards City Hall, it actually opens up Hollis Street to make it feel even wider. And I think what this does, it complements what the Park Avenue District Committee is trying to do on Park Avenue, which is widen the sidewalks, widen the street, make it more user-friendly. Why limit it just to Park Avenue? We're trying to do it on Hollis Street as well. And we also have said that we will continue this space in front of our last phase when we build on the corner of 45th and Hollis. So that alley of trees and the benches would go all the way from Park Street to 45th Street. So, let's see. Just one comment I'd like to make is that we're not going to be pile driving in Phase 2. We don't need to. So we won't be precluding the idea of pile driving in phases 3 and 4, but we won't. At this point, we're not planning on pile driving in phase 2. So let's see. I could show some of the materials if you're interested in seeing it, but let me just talk about it first. The materials of Phase 2 are going to be very similar to what we're using in our current building and on our current campus. The trees, the landscaping, the brick. The brick might not be exactly the same colors, but it'll be a combination of some colors that we're already using. So I could spend a little more time on that, but in the interest of saving me a little time, I'm not going to go into any more detail on that unless I get asked questions on that. But what I'd like to do right now is, and I'll be back, I'm going to ask John Jackson, our head architect, our lead architect, to come up here and show you some color renderings that of Phase 2, which is part of our PDP. But I think it's important for you to see them because, one, we're really excited about it, and everybody I've showed them to is really excited about it, and it will make you realize that, yeah, these are just boxes. We're going to be building some beautiful, beautiful buildings in Emeryville, just like we have in the past. And I think when you see these, I think you'll agree. So, John?
Thank you. In the interest of time, I'll try to be very brief. Just describe what you're looking at in each of these simulations. This is on Hollis Street looking south. You can see the corner of the 4240 building. Looking at the Phase 2 building right here, trees, the widened public space along Hollis that Tom was alluding to in his remarks. Again, you can see a simulation of the brick color there and see how that really fits into the neighborhood. The second view that we have here is looking down Park Avenue facing west. Here, what you're seeing is this two-story glass element, which is a kind of bay that is added to the end of the building. This is all conference rooms, most of the group activity areas that will be in the Phase 2. You can see just the corner of the Phase 1 building over here. So that's really facing the internal park. Here we have Park Avenue facing east. You're seeing the corner, seeing how the building and the perimeter fence fit in there, seeing how the mass of the building set back from the street respects the City Hall complex on the opposite side of the street. And earlier on, there were remarks about exactly how the treatment of the masonry facade, the proportions of the building, brick lintels, deep masonry openings, all of these things are really incorporated into the detailing of the building to give it a sense of permanence, of depth, of being a suitable neighborhood partner in this particular setting. So I think that orients you to what we have in mind. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Before I conclude, I just want to clarify a couple things tonight that I heard that I'd like to just clarify for the record. Our current building is 35 feet high, And also, I'd like to just quickly go over the phasing because of the new buildings, okay? Because it wasn't portrayed 100% accurately. Phase 1 is our current building. Phase 2 is the building that we would be building on the corner of Park and Hollis. And then we have the option of, in Phase 3, to either build on the corner of Hollis and 45th or on the eastern edge of the property. And whichever one we build, we will build the garage at that time. Then Phase 4 will be the building that we don't build in option A or B. Okay, so I just wanted to clarify that. So in conclusion, I'd like to just say we're really excited to be here. We think this is a great project. We hope you do. And I'm open for any questions.
Questions of Tom? I actually have one question. You know, in the study session a year ago, there were a number of concerns raised by the commission. And one of those was the fencing around the campus and how to address the wall, the appearance of a wall there. And I'm curious, with the proposed garage structure in the northeast corner of your campus and the new bike path that you're going to be constructing, I don't see a setback in the tentative map or the model you have there. How are you going to address safety on? You don't then intend to set the garage back. You're going to use the bike path as the screening opportunity there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And we would certainly raise the level at somehow we'll raise the level so that
through graded ventilation or something
exactly,
else
exactly.
on that face.
So we wouldn't have to have a fence
Okay.
on that side.
Okay. I think that's my only question for now. I'll probably have some questions later. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.
So that brings us to